The Drums of War, Chapter 48, Part 1, The Emperor Speaks. Upon the imperial throne of the Exarch Dominion, Emperor Nebuchadnezzar Hammurabi, the 27th, struggled to hold himself upright. It had been long since he had the choice whether he should sit upright. It had been long since he had any ability to do anything else. The War Master, or as he preferred to be called, General, had explained much over the past few days. Days in which he was shown wonders that even he could only weep in awe from. He'd been separated from the mass of tubes and wires invading his body and keeping him alive, painfully alive. And yet he lived. That alone was an act of mighty wisdom and power far beyond his ken. But the sons and daughters of the avenged goddess Republic did not withhold further wonders. No, for they had potent drugs which could banish the agony of continuing to draw breath, and be in mere discomfort. Even more wondrous was that all of those wisdom and power in the arts of medicine made apologies of great sorrow that they had not the power to restore him to full health and youth. He had tried to comfort them with the knowledge that he was already centuries past his natural lifespan, but this seemed to increase their sorrow. Emperor Nebuchadnezzar Hammurabi the 27th found his sons and daughters of the avenged goddess Republic wondrous beings indeed. The time for weeping would come later, however, so he had spent long hours schooling himself to stern resolve. He could finally do as he had desired in his captivity. He could finally do something to protect his people. Emperor Nebuchadnezzar Hammurabi pulled breath into his lungs and began to speak. "My loyal and faithful subjects, hearken, for I am the Emperor Nebuchadnezzar Hammurabi the 27th, and I have much to say to you, yet little time in which to speak. I begin with a simple fact. My health is fading, though the sons and daughters of the avenged goddess Republic are mighty and wise in their arts of medicine, and have done much to ease my days. They still shall come to an end soon. It is my deep and abiding sorrow that I shall perish before you, my faithful and loyal subjects. Can't even begin to take these next vital steps into the future. Fear not, and cast not your bitter tears at my passing, for my days have run long past what they ought to have been. I have been stretched far beyond my limits, and now the end shall no longer be denied to me. I am grateful to the sons and daughters of the avenged goddess Republic for many things, and allowing my death is among them." Emperor Nebuchadnezzar Hammurabi the 27th clutched the arms of his throne, and the attendant came forward with a vessel of water. He panted, focused on the glass, and took a sip in a trembling hand. It was cool and soothing on his throat. He replaced the glass upon the tray and dismissed the attendant with a gesture. "I know not my fate, for my shell shall not be devoured by Xur. Your fate also is beyond my ken and sight. Yet I begin to cherish a hope in my final days, a cherished hope that you shall chart a new path, one of your own devising." Within POW Camp 23 on Agricultural Planet 48 in the clans of Aldra, AleCuevo wore simple garb in his place. Some of his station found blue uniforms adorned with a single Terran rune across the chest and back, and which were indistinct from those given to the warriors to be demeaning and an insult to their rank. AleCuevo had long since ceased to consider himself an acolyte lord. His ideas on the subject had not been met with welcome amongst his former peers. However, the Terrans' refusal to countenance the demands of distinct treatment due to nobility had led to some more clever among them to seek after him to explain the ways of the Terrans to them. However, this day, this friction of maintaining one's standing had fallen away. The Emperor himself would address all of his subjects. They had crowed about the holographic displays in hushed knots, their elbow and knee horns scraping against one another. Each had his eyes on the horrifying image of the Holy Emperor at his throne. AleCuevo had never thought of it before, but he supposed that Emperor Nebuchadnezzar Hammurabi the 27th must have been mortal. Having it confirmed in this way, however, he felt as if it had been punched in the gut. Narrick looked about him and saw many faces showed open fear at the news of the Emperor's impending death, and many more wept with sorrow. His own cheeks were strangely wet. Aboard the glorious man of war of the Orcs Dominion, Initiate Highborn, AleCuevo Nathras sat at his station stunned. He was not alone. They had received an imperial edict to cease all aggressive activity some days ago, and all had been shocked to find that the sons of the vengeful goddess Republic did not strike them down. None had understood what this meant. None could have guessed at this. The Emperor himself was speaking to all directly. Initiate Highborn AleCuevo Nathras had never heard of such a thing passing in all these days, though his days were few in the vastness of history. The Emperor was not a vision of strength, of clear-eyed will. No, he was the image of a man long broken and misused, a ruined shell of a being that even the most cruel of priest-masters would never countenance in inflicting pain upon even the lowliest of serfs. The mere sight of him had stunned the entire bridge into slack-jawed silence. What he had said was more shocking still. "How come it is his soul shall not be devoured?" someone asked in a small voice. In the Exarch trenches on the planet Nendra, Warrior 23841749 sat on a makeshift bench inside the dugout. The lizards had proved hardier than expected, and had even pushed them back to this field of battle. Or so it seemed to him. Such things were above his station, however, so he did not overburden his mind with questions. All he must concern himself with was obeying his betters. Those betters had inexplicably ordered a halt. They had even been told to not fire upon the enemy trenches, which he and many other warriors thought madness. They prayed to the Nana that their acolyte lord had not gone mad. The Initiate Highborns seemed to be still sane, but it was difficult to tell with the nobility. Then Warrior Lead 74938503 brought forth a datapad and propped it up against the earthen wall. And what it showed was why Warrior 23841749 found his mind reeling back in shock and horror. The Emperor was dying. Such a thing was unthinkable. Without the Emperor, who shall entreat with Exur to take only his need of blood of the unworthy and to spare those of worth? Shall Exur not become enraged and devour them all? Worse, shall Exur abandon his post restraining the stars? Warrior 23841749 knew not the answers to these questions, and he could not quiet them in his mind. Upon the angry world Zuru, Laborer 94830294 was in the press of the crowd. She was already collected a few scratches and bruises as she tried to move through the mass. They had been told that the Emperor himself would speak to all, and such a thing was not to be missed. All those unable to attend this day would surely bitterly curse their ill fortune in the years to come, even though the words of the Emperor were words of sorrow. These words of sorrow cut into her very heart. The Emperor was mortal. That wasn't so terribly surprising, but she'd never considered him to be anything other than immortal. Others, too, were stunned by this revelation. The throng seemed to press in closer to the temple, towards the screen upon which the Emperor's frailty had been revealed. He spoke of his death as something which had been long denied him, something which he desired now to hold. And she could not fathom his meaning by this. Neither could those voices around her who began to murmur, "This would not be were our faith stronger. Would that sufficient sacrifice were made? How come it is his soul that should not be devoured, yet he should perish? The blood of great worth may yet save him." Laborer 94830294 thought about a salvation for the Emperor, not about appeasing Exur. She thought only about how all she knew would soon change, and in ways beyond her understanding. Another hush fell over the crowd as the Emperor's rasping voice sounded out from the speakers. "It must be of your own devising, for what you thought was a guiding light was a lie which I am now finally free to correct." It seemed to Laborer 94830294 that the silence somehow deepened at that. In the throne room, Emperor Nebuchadnezzar Hammurabi the 27th labored to draw breath and steeled himself against what must be said. He did not relish this revelation, and it was a source of the fear that gnawed at the heart of hope that he had begun to cherish. Exure was never a god. It seemed to him that with those words, all things would change. All things which were sure shifted, and none could be safe from the ripples of his truth. I was indeed not chosen to intercede in your behalf, but made as an instrument of domination over you. It is my great sorrow that I could do nothing to wrest myself and you, my subjects, from this control, that of a false god. Exure was itself a mere tool, one created for the purpose by those who built all that which crumbles around us. Emperor Nebuchadnezzar Hammurabi the 27th slumped in a throne and hung his head, panting from the exertion of speaking. An attendant began to step forward. With a glance, he warded her off before continuing. We were made by those who came before to fight their battles for them. We were made as warriors to die in their stead in a war against an enemy which had strength and power beyond our comprehension. Yet they failed and we remained, and so did many of the other tools. Exure was one such tool, and its purpose was to ensure that Exarch were strong enough to fight. Without its makers to serve, it went mad. And going back generations out of reckoning, it controlled as puppets those of my line, for only we could survive communing with it. The strength of the imperial house was turned against our subjects, and failed to halt its designs. I and you have been and are guilty of weakness, of being subject to deceit. It is my sorrow that my own penance will be short-lived. He paused for a short moment, as if considering before continuing. But, lo, my captivity is at an end, and my words are mine, and no others. This wonder has come to pass not by my own strength, but that of the sons and daughters of the avenged goddess Republic. For she sent forth her champion to do battle, and they took victory. Yes, we stand now defeated, but her spear thrust comes not, and now avenged, she is vengeful no longer. It is because these champions struck forth into this very place and slew Exure. It is gone and destroyed, once and for all time. It is with gratitude to them that I can speak a word hitherto forbidden to you. Freedom. The sons of the avenged goddess Republic have, with their strength of arms and cunning of mind, did slay my captor, and give unto you a freed emperor. It is regrettable that I were not stronger by the time they knew to free me. I know this word is new, and carries questions rather than meaning. But I have hope you shall grow mighty in wisdom, and learn its meaning in due course. With trembling hands, Emperor Nebuchadnezzar Hammurabi the 27th once again signaled for a drink of water, and the attendant strode forward once more. In the Exarch trenches on the planet Nendra, in the kingdom of Chakuvia, the dugout was full of an awful silence. A thick cloud of doubt spread among the men like a noxious fume. Fear, uncertainty, the very foundations of these men's lives had crumbled beneath their feet, and they did not know how to even begin to confront that terrible fact. Warrior 23841749 cast his gaze about to his fellow warriors, to the initiate highborns, and towards the blinding patch of daylight beyond the dugout's doors. He saw no certainty, no confidence anywhere. What he had killed all those people, for his Exure was not a god, but a captor. He knew himself to be a fighting serf of the Dominion, but even if his emperor was just another link in the chain of Dominion of a lie, what even was he? What did it mean to belong to the Dominion now? Uncertain eyes splashed around the dimly lit earthwork room, each in search of something. They all eventually found instead the datapad propped up against the wall. Upon the agri-world Ziru. It was always a lie was a question that ebbed and flowed amongst the thronging people like waves in a storm. It was unanswered with, no, It is now a lie from the vengeful goddess Republic. This was buffeted with. Xur was slain by her champions. Still others would rejoin. Were we not warned that Xur was a false god? These phrases, in many shades and colorings, from throats despairing to enraged, thrummed through the crowd, swirling and crashing against each other with building tension in the silence left by the Emperor's pause to soothe his throat. And in the midst of that squall, the uncertain and of all stations and ranks stood mute, hoping for answers. Labra 94830294 was among the uncertain, and her throat wished not to shout anything, but to hear something. She knew not what she longed for all she knew crumbled before her eyes, but she did know that she believed her emperor told the truth. Aboard the glorious man of war of the exarch Dominion, the bridge was in total silence. None could tear their eyes from the emperor. Pain struggled to impart to them a parting gift of wisdom. He had told them to grow mighty in wisdom. Initiate Highborn AleCuevo and Nexa desired to take that to heart. He cast his mind to the warriors and serfs that he had been responsible for. He considered whether the methods for enforcing the obedience he had been taught were truly mighty in wisdom. He had visited pain upon many serfs in service of a lie. He had assisted in countless sacrifices. What had it all been for? A lie? And his emperor had been unwilling instrument of that lie, himself treated as a serf. So what did that make him? What did that make his betters? Within POW Camp 23 on Agru Planet 48 in the clans of Aldra, the little knots of prisoners gathered about the holographic displays reeled under this revelation. Nerex Quinn had some suspicions about Xur, but this was more than even the discussions aboard the Tiger Lily had prepared him for. The Emperor had told them to become mighty in wisdom, and he was wise enough to know that he'd been a great fool for most of his life. Knowing that, he tried to imagine being in the tent with his fellows, those who were suddenly thrust into the world with what they believed to be beyond question to be that which needs it most. Within him, a wellspring of sorrow began to rise for them, as they were not eased into such a painful and difficult place as he had been since his capture. Knowing this, he cast his gaze about with more care. He realized that while all were profoundly troubled by the Emperor's revelation, some among them steeled themselves to face the truth. He was surprised to see that many of those making their spines stiffen were acolyte lords. He began to think that perhaps they could be as the Republic officers were to their people, men of trust, men whose authority comes not from fear, but wisdom and resolve. Yes, the priesthood should pass into the dust of the winds, but mayhap the men who once made up could be of use, to be useful to the former serfs to, as Captain John Roberts had explained it, redeem themselves and repent from their old, foolish ways. He began to take note of the men who held growing resolve, and not only those of the nobility as such. End of chapter. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.